All right, today we're diving into one of history's greatest vanishing acts. We're talking about a civilization that was so advanced, so incredibly vast, that the fact it just disappeared feels almost impossible.
Seriously, just picture this for a second. A world with these sprawling, perfectly planned cities, sanitation systems that were way ahead of their time, and a trade network that stretched across the globe. Now imagine all of that just gone, vanished. For thousands of years, that's exactly the story of the Indus Valley civilization. It was like a ghost in our history books, a whole chapter just waiting to be found.
So, how on earth did we rediscover this lost world? Well, for millennia, it was basically hiding in plain sight. It took a few chance encounters and some really dedicated archaeologists to finally bring it back into the light.
Okay, so it all started back in 1826 with these whispers of some strange, mysterious mounds. But things didn't really kick off until the 1920s. That's when the puzzle pieces started to click into place. You had archaeologists digging at two different sites, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, and they pretty quickly realized, hey, these aren't just a couple of old towns. Then, in 1924, Sir John Marshall drops this bombshell announcement on the world. They'd found a whole new civilization, one just as old and grand as ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Wild.
And, calling it grand is a serious understatement. The Indus Valley Civilization, or the IVC as we'll call it, wasn't just hanging out at the same time as Egypt and Mesopotamia. No, it was larger than both of them combined. We're talking a huge area stretching across parts of modern-day Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. This wasn't just some small player. This was a superpower of the ancient world.
So what's truly staggering is this. The first big clue to their genius wasn't some massive pyramid or a fancy palace. Nope, it was the way they laid out their cities. These people were, without a doubt, absolute masters of urban planning.
And I'm not just talking about a few organized streets here and there. Their cities were built on this incredibly sophisticated grid system. I mean, a level of urban design that the world really wouldn't see again on this kind of scale for thousands of years. That kind of precision, it just screams that this was a society built on order and a whole lot of foresight.
What's really wild is how consistent they were. Almost every single city followed the exact same two-part plan. First, you have the citadel, this raised, fortified area for all the important public buildings and, the ruling class. Then, down below, you've got the lower town, a much bigger area where everyone else lived, all laid out in this perfect, neat grid of streets. To pull off that kind of standardized layout across hundreds and hundreds of miles, it's just mind-boggling when you think about it.
And this obsession with standards went all the way down to the smallest detail. Get this, a 4:2:1 ratio. That was the standard for their bricks. Length, width, thickness. And this wasn't just in one city. This was the rule for all their bricks, baked or sun-dried, across the entire civilization. Can you imagine that? It's like having a single building code for an area bigger than Western Europe today. That implies a stunning, almost unbelievable level of central coordination.
But maybe the most impressive thing of all? They might have engineered the world's very first city-wide sanitation system. We're talking about nearly every single house having its own bathroom, and each bathroom had a drain that connected to a larger, covered drain network running under the main streets, complete with manholes for cleaning. I mean, to put that into perspective, cities in Europe wouldn't see public hygiene like this for another 4,000 years. It was absolutely unique in the ancient world.
Okay, but cities are more than just bricks and drains, right? They're about the people who live in them. So, what was life actually like for the folks living in this remarkable civilization? Let's take a look.
Well, for one thing, they were major players on the world stage. We found Mesopotamian texts that talk about a trading partner they called Maluha, and historians are pretty much certain they were talking about the Indus Valley. The IVC folks were exporting their famous cotton and importing all sorts of precious materials, lapis lazuli, gold, you name it. So this wasn't some isolated culture off on its own. This was a bustling, thriving hub of international trade.
And it gives us a real glimpse into their soul. Take this little bronze statuette, the dancing girl, found in Mohenjo-Daro. She's world famous for a reason. They made her using this really sophisticated lost wax technique, and her posture, so confident, so relaxed, it just feels so real, so lifelike. It's an absolute masterpiece of both metalworking and art, and honestly, it feels incredibly modern. And then you have this icon, the so-called Priest King. This piece was also found at Mohenjo-Daro. It's this bust carved from soapstone, showing this bearded man with such a calm, almost meditative expression.
So, was he a ruler, a high priest, a spiritual leader? We just don't know for sure. But he definitely gives us some clues about what their leadership might have looked like.
You know, maybe the most common things they left behind are these thousands and thousands of tiny stone seals. They're all intricately carved, usually with an animal and a short line of their mysterious script. And the most common image, by a long shot, is this one, a mythical-looking unicorn. What did it mean? Was it some kind of family crest or clan symbol? A god? It's one of their most beautiful and most enduring mysteries.
And all of this, well, it brings us to the biggest questions of all. Because for everything we have uncovered, the Indus Valley civilization is still pretty much defined by the profound, deep riddles they left behind for us to try and solve. So, riddle number 1. Who was in charge? See, unlike in Egypt where you've got pharaohs and giant pyramids and lavish royal tombs, here, there's nothing like that. No grand palaces, no kingly burials. That suggests they probably didn't have a single all-powerful king. But then, how do you explain that extreme standardization across their entire territory? That had to come from somewhere, right? So was it a council of powerful merchants, a group of priests, some kind of collective government? The evidence just doesn't give us a clear answer. It's tantalizingly contradictory. Okay, on to their second great riddle, their language. The script itself is just fascinating. It's written in a style called boustrophodon. That's a fun word. It literally means as the ox turns, like when an ox is plowing a field, back and forth. So you read one line from right to left, and then the very next line you switch and read it left to right. But here's the real kicker, the ultimate key to their world. After 100 years of trying, nobody has been able to decipher these 400 unique signs. What are they saying? Are they recording laws, religious myths, just simple trade records? Until we can finally read their words, it's like we're looking at their entire civilization through a tiny keyhole. Their story, in their own words, is still a complete and total mystery. And that, of course, leads us to the final and maybe the most haunting riddle of all. After centuries of stability, of incredible prosperity, why did this magnificent urban civilization just fade away? Well, there's no single smoking gun here. The old theory you might have heard about a violent Aryan invasion has been pretty much discredited. There's just no archaeological evidence of a huge war or conflict. Instead, the prime suspects today are all environmental. We're looking at things like climate change, increasing dryness, a major river system literally drying up. There's also evidence of catastrophic floods and maybe even earthquakes that changed the course of the rivers they depended on. Any one of these things could have slowly strangled the cities, making that kind of urban life impossible to sustain. So the general consensus today is that this wasn't some sudden, dramatic event. It was much more likely a slow, gradual collapse, a kind of perfect storm of environmental problems and maybe even economic pressures that, over time, led people to just abandon the great cities. So in a way, the civilization didn't really die, it just de-urbanized. It sort of dissolved back into the rural landscape. And so we're left with this incredible story. A society that absolutely mastered urban planning and public health, that built a peaceful, prosperous world based on order and trade, and in the end, it was undone by forces of nature it just couldn't control. Their silent ruins stand today as this powerful and frankly humbling reminder of just how fragile even the most sophisticated civilizations, including our own, can be.